So, it's been a minute since I've done something like this. Over the years, I always make a list for the end of the year of my favorites. And you know what? It's become increasingly harder as I've gotten older. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the lists that I've made over the years don't really reflect how I feel now. God damn it, like last year, what I felt was my favorite movie of the year was almost immediately overhauled by my claimed second favorite of the year, within a few weeks. I realize that time is the biggest judgment in all this. It's hard for me to make a ranking that I'm comfortable with. Time tells me how much I think about a movie, how long of an impression it leaves, how often I revisit the movie. So this year, I thought to do something different. Instead of doing a ranked list, I thought I would do something a little more categorical. It just makes things easier because there's certain movies I want to talk about that I don't necessarily think is the best movie, but I want to share, I want to celebrate. So my categories will be as followed. My favorite foreign film of the year, my favorite horror film, a film that surprised me the most, a Wildcard, a random movie that I want to talk about, a film featuring one of my favorite actors, a film by one of my favorite filmmakers, and my top 3 favorite movies of the year, in no particular order. It just means that they're above the rest. Okay, that's our foundation. It's set. Let's dive in. First, I'll shout out some movies that I loved this year, but couldn't fit them into a category. Like Blue Beetle. I adored Blue Beetle. I thought it was fun and charming, a little by the numbers, sure, but it had a strong and authentic emotional resonance to Hispanic Latino culture that made it feel very fresh. May December. I absolutely love and adore Natalie Portman. Every once in a while, she will have some movies under her belt that are devastating. This one is no different, surrounded by a strong cast with a standout performance from Charles Melton. John Wick Chapter 4 was a genuine surprise. I went in with low expectations and walked away with some of, if not the best action set pieces in the entire series. I'm sure there will be more movies, but to me this movie was such a fitting end to such a standout series. Oppenheimer. Oh, Nolan. Bravo. It's quite an impressive feat that he did something completely different from his usual filmography, and yet still have all of his effective touchstones. A juggernaut of a movie that has this weight carried by performances, sound, music, and haunting visuals. Easily one of his best work. Damn. Damn. What can I say? There's just something about this. A Spanish film from a Spanish filmmaker taking a story that we have seen 100 times over and make it feel so fresh and so original. A plane crashes and the survivors overcoming the odds. It's all familiar territory, right? If it was a Hollywood film, you would see all the old tropes, the emotional triumphs and the schmaltzy sentimentality. To put it more bluntly, it wouldn't have teeth. Which is what makes this stand out for me. That's the edge foreign films have. It's the finer details in this movie that makes it stand out to me. The kind of details we tend to gloss over or rather not think about. The plane crash in of itself is one of the most horrific experiences I've ever had in a movie theater. It's so anxiety-inducing, the anticipation of the crash is one thing, and would cut away in a Hollywood film. Here, we experience the impact, the carnage that unfolds, and holy shit. You know, we go through the tropes of the means of survival for these characters, but this movie explores what it actually does to somebody and visualizing it. I mean this in the graphic detail of these characters urinating, and it's black. Even the aftermath has aspects that people don't think about, visually, mentally, and physically. I legitimately cried while watching the ending. Again, it's the details you don't think about that makes it truly devastating and harrowing to watch. But it also makes the rewarding moments all the more richer because those moments of happiness, of victory, are genuinely earned. I am actually not a big Godzilla fan. I wanted to state that to demonstrate how good this movie is. When watching this, it occurred to me how funny it was that Godzilla obviously is a monster, and yet his movies are rarely treated as horror. Granted, I say that with very limited knowledge, but from the movies I have seen, more times than not, they're not actually intended to be scary. In this movie, every time Godzilla came in, each sequence was more horrifying than the last. Godzilla to me immediately shot up in the ranks that he belongs in terms of a horror movie monster. You have spectacular sequences like the boat chase, but when you see things like him first stomping around the city, and the filmmakers do the genius thing of using perspective to play with the terrifying aspect of Godzilla attacking, it's thrilling. And if that wasn't fantastic enough, you then have the human element that honestly makes Godzilla feel like a background character. The human element is compelling and on the forefront. Godzilla operates as he always should, as this metaphorical antagonist for our hero, and it's amazing. Yeah, I really like this one. A lot. I am not the biggest MCU fan. I will even go out of my way to say comic book movies of recent years have fallen out of favor for me. I did not see Captain Marvel, or any of the Marvel TV shows that was building up to this movie. But I found this movie strangely magnetic. I had this weird desire to check it out. I am going to give credit that it was mostly due to the director, Nia DaCosta. I am a fan of hers, and I was genuinely curious what she could get away with or how much of herself she could put in a huge blockbuster film like this. And to my surprise, and I mean this as a huge compliment, it felt like a huge homage to low-budget sci-fi films of the 60s and 70s. There were certain production designs, the staging of scenes, and how fight scenes were choreographed. It felt like Super Sentai meets John Carpenter's Dark Star. I have no idea if that was Nia's intention, but that's my general read on it. I was shocked the first time I watched it, and I watched it again to be sure if I actually enjoyed it, which I did. My enjoyment derives from how genre-focused it was, because superficially, it is a paint-by-the-numbers superhero flick. But there are moments, and scenes, and ideas, and production design choices that made this a little more flavorful for me. And with that, I am giving full credit to Nia DaCosta because I am not sure I would have enjoyed it otherwise. So here's an American remake from half of the Farrelly brothers. Not really a typical choice for me. But there were a couple of things that stayed with me, and I will admit, at their prime, I enjoy the Farrelly brothers and their movies. And this movie is an example of something that I've always respected them for, and has always been a constant. In each of their movies, there are representation for people with disabilities. That resonates with me on a sentimental level. The movie is pretty standard. Woody Harrelson is forced into a situation where he coaches a team made of people with disabilities. I won't lie, that premise alone sold me, and I found it endlessly charming. I love that the disabilities are not played off as one-off jokes. These are characters with their own agencies. It is a comedy that doesn't treat these characters as punchlines. It has a bit of a dramatic flair, but with dignity, and I respect it greatly for that. I have such a soft spot for Emma Stone. More times than not, she is a selling point for me to watch a movie. Poor Things is a really twisted, surreal kind of film, but oddly delightful? It invoked something we may have seen from Tim Burton if he stayed on track. Through Emma Stone, she's a character that has infantile attributes, which in of itself is funny, but there's an actual full growth we see. She approaches this weird, surrealistic painting of a world. She has bright eyes and she's eager to learn. As the story unfolds, things start to sink in as she learns and develops this callous, apathetic nature. It's actually quite heartbreaking to see. The way Emma carries this character through such an emotional journey is really elegant. There's a bluntness to the movie. It never shies away from any and all aspects of humanity, from sexual desires to the cruel nature of humanity. Emma brings this pureness to the role, that every new emotion, every new learning experience has a rawness that you also as a viewer recognizes. You find yourself relating to moments of your first experiences as Emma's character does, making it very impactful. Wow. Just wow. I mean, there were strong contenders this year, but for me, it does not get better than Marty. Martin Scorsese is just one of those filmmakers for me that not only will I watch anything he makes, but more times than not, I genuinely enjoy it. I strongly felt that The Irishman was a strong swan song from a man with a 50-plus year career. But man, this guy, what the hell? Scorsese is a filmmaker that can have a balance of strong subtext with flashy, fast-paced films. But in his twilight years, his films are a lot more sobering and somber, and it's been strongly reflected by the material he has been tackling. Killers of the Flower Moon is a story that is truly heartbreaking and downright horrific event in history. De Niro reminds me why he is one of my all-time favorite actors, portraying this quote-unquote kindly, progressive, unassuming old man, who is one of, if not the most, despicable characters De Niro has ever played. And looking at his catalog of characters, that is saying something. Watching enough Scorsese movies, you see a pattern of how these kind of stories play out. This one in particular hits similar beats, and I had this aching feeling about the ending. Because I could not imagine that there could be a satisfying ending, an ending that could justify or make all this okay. And following through with his sobering, somber twilight years, the ending is genius. Heartbreaking, but genius. I could not expect less from this man. Beautifully simplistic. I absolutely adore the symmetry and simplicity of the setups and payoffs in this movie. I am a huge admirer of the Filippo brothers. For those of you that don't know, these guys have spent a decade making YouTube videos, including one of my all-time favorites. What was clear in those videos that is clear now is their affinity for production. Watching Talk to Me, you wouldn't think this was their first feature just based on its presentation. It is so well crafted, so well put together, and surprisingly clever. Also notably, smart. What I mean by that is looking at their videos, they are ambitious, and they go big, and they're overtly violent. So tackling a horror film, I was expecting it to be bombastic, over the top, grotesque. It's actually admirable how much restraint they have, particularly for their first feature. Just to be clear, there are big grotesque moments, but they hold on to those moments so that they have a larger impact. They are more concerned with story first. It reminds me a lot of the original Halloween. A simple premise, compelling characters, funny, snarky dialogue, and not in that pop culture referential kind of way, like it's actually funny. The movie is nothing groundbreaking, but it doesn't need to be. It's about craft, and this one is really well put together. You see pieces and setups. Story elements you could see miles away or the horror that awaits. But the genius part? You don't want to be right. And that's why it's such an effective and clever horror film. Sometimes you need movies like these from time to time to bring you back to basics and reignite why you enjoy movies so much. Fuck. I mean, fuck. After watching this, I am convinced Emerald Fennell is my favorite contemporary filmmaker. Two strong movies, back to back, with Promising Young Woman, which already came out swinging, and then this. The content between both movies couldn't be more radically different, yet somehow they share similar traits. Promising Young Woman was a very close, very personal, in-depth examination of rape culture, and the kind of people that perpetuate it. Saltburn is about that yearning of having something you don't have, to become something you're not. About a kid, a worm who wants to be close to greatness, who wants to taste greatness. And I do mean taste quite literally. To put it bluntly, this movie is pretty unhinged, but it never deterred me from loving it. Truth be told, I love depravity. I have to say, Emerald truly swings for the fences with this one. Like Promising Young Woman, she uses dark comedy to balance out the material. I think the dark comedic element does a lot of heavy lifting for this movie. Where Promising Young Woman deals with real-life subject matter that's uncomfortable that has to be offset by dark comedy, this one goes places that are, for lack of a better word, insane, and almost too fantastical, but uses dark comedy to give that sense of self-awareness and somewhat keeps it grounded. It's such a whiplash of a movie where I thought I knew what was happening, but it constantly takes turns and practically teases me, and suddenly finding myself in a complete 360 in my entire thought process. I genuinely enjoy Emerald as a filmmaker. I think she has a good head on her shoulders in terms of orchestrating impactful stories with excellent music cues and truly powerful images. It's 2 for 2. I can't wait for the next one. Oh, Margot, my Margot. What can't you do? I mean, what can I say? Now, I will admit, I was very hypercritical after my initial viewing. I was looking for a different kind of camp and satire than what this movie was offering. But after several rewatches throughout the year, the hypercriticisms have softened, and I take it fully for what it is now. I enjoy the powerhouse that Ryan Gosling is. I enjoy the production and the set designs and the costumes, all the attention to detail. The thing of it is, and I failed to recognize this with my initial watch, a lot of my complaints were plot-based, and selfishly as a super annoying Margot fan, I wanted more meat from her performance. But when I actually look at it, it is actually pretty insane that Margot managed to work a performance from an object that has no personality, to craft a character that's naive but not incredibly ditzy, shallow but not cruel, empathetic but also not dramatic. It's kind of a miracle in contrast to someone like Gosling who has all the fun stuff. The movie itself should be applauded that it came out as effective and as competent as it did, especially considering it was a movie with a major studio and a toy company, all, I am sure, with their own ideas. But the fact that the creative forces managed to persevere, not only telling a story for women, but people in general that made everyone feel involved, is such an impressive feat. It manages to shine through to tell a good, engaging story with genuinely powerful moments, notably from America Ferrera. Regardless of my petty gripes, more than anything, I'm just so happy that this movie on a large scale made the audience understand what a truly powerful force Margot Robbie is. Somebody who is more than just a pretty bottle blonde, but a fierce creative that advocates for storytellers to see their visions through. Calling back to Saltburn, that too was done under Margot Robbie as a producer with her production company, and for her to be absolutely on board with stories like these, I mean, there hasn't been a year since 2017 where she hasn't given me something to gnaw on and make me a happy fanboy. Man, what else can I say? I love her. And there you have it. That's my list for 2023. Hopefully it was enjoyable and well-rounded with some variety. Going forward, I will probably be doing my list this way. It made movies more enjoyable to watch as opposed to trying to figure out a ranked list. Because depending on taste, it can either be all blockbuster genre films or all highbrow art house films. Making lists like that aren't exactly fun in my opinion, especially when you try to rank them and justify them. It's too much for my head to sort out. I love movies. I want to celebrate the ones that brought me joy and this emotional resonance. I wanted to make something that reflected that, something fun and indulgent. I wanted to share my excitement for the Marvels in the same breath as Society of the Snow. Doing a list that was category-based provided that opportunity. Anyway, thank you for watching. Until next year.